Okay, welcome everyone. It's good to see Cabbage members and guests from across Western Canada. My name is Brian Queen and I'll be hosting tonight's meeting from the Calgary chapter of Cabbage. We're excited to have Jesse Meyer of Pergamena Parchment and Leather as our guest speaker tonight. But before we get started, I'd just ask that once Jesse starts his presentation that you keep your microphones muted so we don't have any accidental background noise. Also, if you have any questions, you should post them to the chat room and we'll monitor that. Thea will be looking at that. And after the lecture, we'll go through those questions. And if there's any still time after that, you can ask Jesse questions directly. But right now, I'll pass this over to Linda Tanaka, who will introduce our guest speaker. Linda?
Hi, everyone. Pergamena has been in business for 500 years. Beginning in Germany in 1550, the family moved to the United States in 1830. Currently, the company operates in the Hudson River Valley in Upper New York State. They produce leather for bookbinding, piano action, and shoes, as well as supplying designers and craftspeople with leathers for restoration and various products. Jesse Meyer, our guest tonight, is the artist within the company who has developed the line of parchment used by calligraphers and artists around the world. So there, Jesse, show us what you got.
Thank you. All right, so can I share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay. All right, let's see. You guys all seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right, I have PowerPoint, but I also had this one. I have several slide presentations, so I'm trying to sort of combine the best of a few of these and do it in a timely fashion. So, so forgive me if I have to move around a little bit here or there. But right, resume share. Screen sharing. It told me okay, sharing is paused. Bring the shared window to the front. This didn't come up yesterday.
It looked okay on our part.
All right.
Yeah, right now we see a slide deck sort of thing, but then.
Okay.
Oh, now it's.
I just moved that because I was looking for this. Okay. What do you guys see now?
I think a screen was just being pulled away. So we see a stretched image here. We don't see, that's what I see, it's kind of frozen there.
You may have to go out and come back in, Jesse.
Go out
like
of
just, of the screen share, just stop screen sharing and then get it to where you want it to, and then come back in once it's where you want it to be.
Got it. All right, let me escape. Sorry, I thought we had worked these out yesterday, but
not a problem. That's all right.
Okay. Now I'll do slideshow. Okay. And now I'll try sharing again. All right. They can now see my application. Well, it's about time. Okay. You guys can all see that vegetable tanning, leather production, and various
defects and pitfalls.
Defects
yes.
and pitfalls. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me, and sorry for that slight delay. Thanks for the introduction, Linda. Technically, it's not quite 500 years. It's, I think, 470 something. But when it's that many years, who's counting?
Yeah.
So, yes, and thanks to all of you guys for attending this, and Brian and Linda for the invitation. Glad to be here. I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can for you. I'll try to run through this presentation as quickly as possible, but you know, so to leave time for questions and whatever questions you might have, you're welcome to ask in person afterwards, or if you want to put some in the chat down at the bottom, and I can, we can go through those afterwards. So, but so without further ado, so this is as it says down on the bottom, for Winterthur University of Delaware program. This is the most recent one I did. So I hope you don't mind me repurposing this one. It covers most of the same information, but they were, Winterthur has it's in Delaware. They've got a leather conservation and parchment conservation program. So they had asked if I could do a little dog and pony show about our operation. So I figured it was sort of relevant to what you guys are working with, parchment and leather. So, but so these are, I'm not a trained leather chemist necessarily, but this is the family business. I've been working in it for, I'm 49. I've been working in it since I was, summers between high school and college. So probably 25 years or so. So whatever wisdom I have to impart is just stuff that I've learned on the job, trial and error. And I've had a lot of trial and error. So, but right, okay, I guess I just have to click on it. All right, so as Linda said, we've been around for 500 years, more or less. That makes us fairly old. We haven't been in the same place the entire time, but methods of tanning have certainly changed as things have gone, passed down through time. Traditionally, they were done similar to what this picture looks like. This is a tannery in Morocco, one that I visited, and this was something like 800 years old and still functioning. So pretty amazing. Pit tanneries different than other more modern tanneries in that you move the hide from pit to pit depending on what part of the process it is. Whereas nowadays, whatever hides you're processing, you usually have them stay in one drum, and then you cycle in and out whatever liquids or part of the process that you're working on. So it takes a little less space, but it's a bit more water intensive. So these are what tanneries look like maybe slightly more recently, including some of the tools. Some of these look familiar to us. We still have similar items in our facility. This one here, that sort of T-shaped tool, is a deherring or an unherring tool. I actually do have one of those. This is again slightly more recent. These are mainly, I think, cow hides that these guys are working with here, which would be for a lot of this was shoe leather. It says at the bottom there, the seller of an upper leather tannery. So that's shoe uppers. So this is our tannery. This is an early photograph of our tannery with my great-great-grandfather, Richard E., looking pretty snazzy in his bowler hat there from June 1903. And the Meyer side of the family has been the side of the family that has been involved in this throughout its history. And I heard stories from my father and grandfather about how they would wear their suits to work. This was in North Bergen, and they lived just down the street from where the tannery was. So they would walk to work every morning wearing their very nice suit. But they weren't so pretentious so as to not stop and pick up dog poop on the way, because they would do that and then they would add it to the pits where the tanning and the beaming, the unherring portion was done. So a little unsavory, but that was part of the processing at that point. This is again more recent, 1941. So that's that guy there with the military-looking hat, the tallest one, basically right in the center. That's my grandfather. That's Walter. And then next to him on the right is my great uncle Richard. And then the short guy, the bald guy, to his right is their father. So I guess that would be my my great grandfather. Excuse me. So, all right. Okay. So, what does our facility do? We make leather. We make parchment. What do we need to make leather and parchment? The appropriate facility. Ours is fairly small, but we still manage to get a lot of that done. proper equipment, the equipment can be very expensive and can take up a lot of room, and it's also very can be very finicky to maintain. We use a lot of old and repurposed equipment or refurbished equipment when possible. The oldest machines tend to work the best. They break down the least, and they're the simplest to operate. So a lot of water, a lot of tanneries and parchment making operations for that matter, were set up next to rivers and bodies of water so that they would have a source of fresh water when necessary. They'd bring that water in. They would do whatever processing they need, washing of hides, filling of drums and pits, and then they would basically wash that back out afterwards. Also, lots of skins and hides. We handle several different. We handle cow hides, some sheep, depending on whether it's parchment or leather. If it's parchment, it's sheep, deer, goat, and calf. So four different kinds are the main types that we produce. As far as leather goes, goat, deer, cow, and calf are the main types of leather that we produce. So we have access to all of those and from different sources. Tanning chemicals, we have thankfully tanning chemical suppliers that we've got good relations with, and order those chemicals regularly. Technical expertise and experience. So I've got a lot of the experience portion. Technical expertise, not as much, but I fumble my way through, and I do, as I said, a lot of experimentation. So I've certainly learned a few things. What technical expertise I don't have, I will tend to consult with industry experts. Some of our chemical suppliers, they're also very helpful. So, and then staff. Staff is always challenging. Even at the moment, for instance, we had 4 production floor employees last year who quit successively. We tried to bring in one to fill a position, and we had to fill that position 4 times, and it's currently empty, which means it's me having to do all this work myself downstairs, because it's as you could maybe guess, it's dirty and smelly and wet, and it's a lot of labor, and surprisingly, it's not something that people like to do. Maybe they'd rather sit on a forklift and move boxes, or sit in front of a computer, or any number of different things. But there is no arguing that working at a tannery can be challenging and hard labor. So this is what a good sized tannery looks like that does pit tanning. This one's over in the UK, and it shows you just how much floor space can be taken up just handling the hides. That's several drums back there. That's what those are called, those wooden things. It's our tanning drums. They are basically like washing machines set on their sides that turn, and the skins are inside the drums and basically get moved around and stirred in order to make the chemicals, to make for equal and consistent penetration of chemicals. Otherwise, those pits on the floor, they'll put the hides in those pits, let them sit there for weeks or sometimes months at a time, and the chemicals will gradually soak in that way. So, and yeah, there are industry handbooks out there that suggest the different amount of space that a tannery can take up. So we have a fairly small tannery. It'd be nice if we had a lot more space. So this is an example of what it can look like when all that work is done next to a river. You probably don't want to live downstream from a tannery. That's where they're going to be flushing all of their nasty chemicals. So here are examples of some of the old tools that are used, and we still use some of these. Those 2-handled knives there basically are for unhairing. There's a wooden knife there, and then a metal knife. The wooden knife is basically for scraping off the hair and squeezing it off without actually cutting the hide. So it's very handy. Hides are put in a solution of calcium hydroxide and water, and it's a fairly antiquated process, but it works very well. And while the hides sit in there, the pH of the solution causes the hides to swell and will make the hair so that it can basically just rub right off very easily. So, and here is a movie of that in action. It's short, but if it's done right, you can just basically, if the skin has been sitting in that that tub of chemicals long enough, it should just come right off. And it's always very gratifying to remove all that nasty stuff and then get down to the hide. And that's one step closer to it being a material that is recognizable to the end user. So, okay, yes, got that. All right. This is what's called the fleshing machine. This is a very new piece of equipment that we purchased. This does a very good job, a very thorough job of cleaning the flesh off the inside of the hide. The other side was removing the hair. Then you have to flip the hide over, and then it goes through this operation, which is a cylindrical blade running at high speed, and it will basically peel the flesh off the inside of the skin. So it's noisy, it's dangerous if you're not careful. It's wet and smelly, but this is what that machine looks like when it's stopped. So that's that big barber pole looking thing there is the blade, and it spins at high speed. You certainly don't want to touch that while it's in operation. And this process up to this point is something that both the leather and the parchment will go through. So, you're looking to remove everything that is not the hide. So the hair has to go, the flesh has to go. You have to try to wash out as much of the grease as possible. Anything else, blood, hair roots, what have you. These are what the tanning drums look like. So after the hides have been cleaned, they spend a lot of their time in these drums turning. So the one on the left is the milling drum. That's where the dry hides go to basically soften them. The small one in the center is where I do a lot of the parchment and a lot of the small experiments. And then there's the one on the right, which is for doing much larger loads. So, and as you can see, it's very wet. So it requires a lot of water, a lot of washing. So, nope. Okay. This is what the leather looks like while it's in process. These are a bunch of cowhides in one of the drums in the process of being tanned. Cows are very heavy and very large, so we do smallish loads given the weight and the size of these things. So 40 to 50 cowhides if is optimal. But the calf, goat, or the deer and the sheep, we can fit much more of those in a drum, and we try to do as many as possible, so to make it as efficient as possible. The goat and the calf, we can do a bit more of those because the deer and the sheep, they tend to have an awful lot of hair or wool, and that takes up a lot of space. So it's important to try to make sure that the drum isn't overcrowded. You put too much stuff in one drum, then you don't really get equal distribution of chemicals and so on. So this machine here is we call it a setting out machine. It basically will squeeze the water out of the hide once it has come out of those drums to help speed up the drying process. So, and that is primarily leather that we run through this. That's a cowhide that I'm wringing out basically. So this is what the parchment looks like once it comes out of those drums, and once the hair has been removed and the flesh has been removed. Sometimes we'll bleach the hides to make them whiter. Other times we'll dye them a variety of colors. But either way, they need to be stretched and dried. So those frames there, those kind of ladder type frames, are what we use to stretch the hides in. And as you can see, you can push on the hide, and it's very elastic. So it's important that you don't put this on like a screen or something with a backing, because it has to be elastic enough for you to be able to scrape and stretch the hide as you go and wring out excess water. And also as you go, you're stretching the hide this way in order to sort of increase the surface area. And at some point you have stretched it as tight as it can go, and then you basically just leave it to dry. If it's done properly, it can dry, usually overnight. So, and as the caption there says, it will shrink a lot. So it's important that it stays under tension and that it does not move, or else it will end up getting very wrinkly as it dries. It doesn't want to dry flat. Parchment skins in general are meant to be wrapped around an animal, so they tend to have a lot of curves in them, built into them. So it's important to stretch it out and dry it as flat as you can. So this is what we do with the leather. We hang these up on these screens here and try and also dry them flat. Those are cow sides, basically a left and a right half of a cowhide. So after the hides come down, the leather in particular, it's called staking. So, and it's called that S-T-A-K-I-N-G because it used to be done over a stake in the ground. You'd hammer a stake into the ground, and then you'd take the leather and then run it over top using your gravity, you know, your weight and gravity to basically help to soften and stretch the hide. This is a slightly more modern version of that operation, which will help to stretch the hide between those jaws there. So here's that in action. It's a bit of a hairy looking machine, and it can hurt, but it's never really going to do anything unpredictable. So as long as you keep your hands out of the way, that's the key, keeping your hands out of the way. So you get the idea. After the staking portion and the hide is softened, it goes through, it gets split. And this is an operation a lot of bookbinders would know well when trying to get leather to a particular thickness to do a cover or to do turn-ins or so on. You know, you can do that with a paring knife, but if you're looking to have an entire hide or an entire panel split to a particular thickness, you would use a machine like this. Excuse me. To wet my whistle. So there's a large band knife that runs from the left to the right side, and it's in constant motion, and it's also being sharpened as you go to keep the edge sharp. And while that blade runs back and forth, you are then taking a hide and then feeding it sort of perpendicular across that blade. And as it goes across, it will basically get split into two portions. And it is a fairly exact operation, which allows you to get hides as thin as 0.4 millimeters or 1 ounce, or sometimes an ounce and a half, like 0.6 millimeters. So fairly thin stuff. So these are examples of the hides and skins that we work with. The cow hides up top, those are folded and are salted and folded and will basically stay stacked up so that they can drain and dry out and not go bad. Goat skins, deer. The goats we get from slaughterhouses nearby. Cow hides we get from farmers and people who do tan and return, where that's what we refer to it as, where people will bring us their hides and we will tan them and then give them back those same hides and charge them for the service. Deer skins we get from local hunters. Calf we also get from slaughterhouses nearby, and sheep as well. Although a lot of times when we get the sheep, the wool has already been removed and taken off by somebody else, so we just get the hides, and that takes up a lot less space. So deer skin are pretty gnarly looking. They've got a lot of bugs. They've got a lot of holes and scars in them. The picture in the upper left there, sorry, in the upper right, I have circled, probably hard to see, but that's basically an arrow wound that has been healed up. So it went in one side, didn't hit any vital organs, and then managed to exit the animal on the other side, and the animal lived to die another day, and healed up. So we see things like that not infrequently. So the deer especially have an awful lot of character. They will often have holes because if they've arrived at our shop, that means they've likely been shot, bow hunting or with a rifle. But they have a lot of character. They've got a lot of tick bites, a lot of cuts and scratches and scars. So a lot of it can be beautiful in its own way, but they are certainly not consistent and clean. So that's the nature of it being a wild animal. So here is, as Linda mentioned in her demo, buckskin is one of the sort of historical, legacy products that we made. That's my father there sorting skins that were going to be sent to Steinway Pianos, which was our longest standing customer, making this particular material. So, and this little video here shows what that operation looks like. So it's not necessarily the hammer portion, which is felt, but those parts marked in red, those are the parts that are padded with leather. And leather works well for that because it is soft, it doesn't pack down and get hard over time, and it also makes it so that it's not very noisy when those pieces rub against each other. So you don't want a noisy piano action, as it's referred to, especially while you're playing. So these are the goat skins. The one on the right is a piece of parchment. The piles in the center and the one on the left, those are the leather. Once it's been tanned and then it's being dried or waiting to be stretched and dried. We're fortunate that we are making both of these products and that we can do it in our facility because they both follow the same process for a good portion of the processing. So so here are some examples of some of the stuff that we've produced. The pattern on goatskin is very prominent. It's the grain, the hair follicles, and the grain pattern is very prominent. It can be very beautiful, but it's also, if it's done well, you will be able to tell that it's actually leather that you're looking at. It's not going to be clean and characterless. So this is calfskin, which we also produce in leather, and you can see those long sort of parallel lines. They are basically will radiate out from the spine. Those are sort of fat wrinkles and growth marks that show up on calf. They tend to spread out over time, so you don't really see them in full-grown hides, full-grown cows, but as calf, those will show up a lot. So you'll see a lot of those lines, but you'll see almost no hair follicles whatsoever because they tend to be, they're pretty young. So the hair follicles are almost microscopic. So, okay, and these are different ways that you can process a hide. We do the parchment and rawhide. We do a little bit of the alum towing and the vegetable tanning. Those are our specialties. So we try to stay away from chrome tanning. That limits what we can offer, but we don't want to deal with heavy metals and possible wastewater contamination. That would be a nasty thing, and that would get us in a lot of trouble. So, so this is just covering a little bit of what I spoke about. This is me doing some alum tawed stuff. It's almost like baking, as I said there. You're using potassium alum, olive oil, eggs, and flour. So you're trying to mix all this together and impregnate the hides with the olive oil and the flour, and the eggs tend to provide it helps to emulsify the olive oil and keep it in the skin. And it's just we would refer to that as a fat liquor, which is basically the greases and oils that you put in a skin to make it soft and pliable. So this is what they look like while they're drying. They look like big potato chips. I'm actually in the process right now of trying to rehydrate some of these for an experiment that I'm doing for somebody. So aldehyde tanning, this is not something that we really do, but this guy here, Matt Richards, someone who I've worked with and met, super nice guy, and that was his specialty, was aldehyde tanning, which is using brains, as he suggests, soap or eggs, and he can make some very, very nice leather. It's a lot of work, but it's also using a very simple chemical process, so it's fairly earth friendly. So this is the chrome tanning, as I said, not something that we do. Where it is done, one of the big concerns is the health of the labor force and the wastewater contamination. So as you can see, people aren't necessarily wearing protective equipment. So mineral tanning, again, not really something that we do, but it uses analogs of chrome, so aluminum, zirconium, and iron. So the veg tanning that we do, there are several different types of veg tanning, and veg tanning basically refers to tanning using plant extracts. Every plant has some tannins in it, but some have more than others, and each tannin will impart slightly different character to a hide. The type that we use is chestnut and mimosa, sumac, and quebracho. The ones that are the most stable, especially for bookbinding purposes, tend to be chestnut and sumac. So we do a lot of chestnut tanning. That's the majority of the small hides that we produce, like the calf and the goat, especially for archival purposes. For larger hides with cow, for instance, we use a combination of mimosa and chestnut because it will penetrate much more quickly and gives a much lighter color. And they're not really going to be using that for archival purposes anyway. So, but yeah, those are the four types that we use. So that, along with maybe oak, which people might, recognize as, something they've heard, oak tanning or bark tanning. That's the sort of stuff that's done in pits, and that yields very thick, very stiff leather that people might use for shoes. So these are some of the other examples, depending on where you come from, that people have used as tannins and can have sort of commercial applications. So a lot of the tannins are extracted from different parts of the tree. This here is just a picture of a lot of hemlock bark that was harvested from some trees up here in the Northeast US. There used to be an awful lot of hemlock. There's almost none now, because what do you know? We thought that this was a never-ending resource, and we chopped it all down. And as that little story, recollects there, one of the largest tanneries in the world used to be located in the heart of the Catskills, and this was back in the 1820s or so, 1830s. And they set up shop there because there was huge amounts of hemlock trees in the area. They basically, cut down everything within a 25-mile radius and use that to supply their bark mills and their tanning pits. And as soon as that was gone, they basically, they denuded entire mountainsides, and then they shut down and they moved on to exploit resources elsewhere. So I'm hoping that we have learned our lesson and don't operate that way. So this is Herman Oak, one of the few remaining pit tanneries in the United States. Herman Oak, Horween, I think, does some. They're based in Chicago, and then there's Wickett and Craig, which is based in Pennsylvania. Those are the three that I know of. There might be others, but those are all three of them have been around for quite a while. They're fairly famous, and they have a long history of making very nice leather. The process of making leather is, there's several steps in it. So I won't go into too many details, other than the first 7 or 8 steps of that are what's called beaming. Beaming being done over a wooden beam or a half barrel, which is why it's referred to as beaming. So this is where you're looking to remove the hair and remove the flesh, and all those things will help to basically loosen the hair and clean out impurities from the hide. Once you get to step 8 and 9, you're looking at pickling the hides, and that will preserve them in salt and acid, and then bring them to the proper pH in order for you to start tanning. And especially with the veg tans, they tend to tan at a lower pH, so the pickling is important. So once that tanning process happens, which can take several days of constant mechanical action to beat the tannins into the middle of the hide, once that's done, then you add greases and oils to the hides in order to soften it and make it pliable, and make it so that you can burnish it, and then some more acid to sort of fix the fat liquors, and then dyes also, and you would be fixing those dyes with some acids. So we do all of that at our facility. So And then a long process. If you're recording this, you guys are welcome to go back over this later to see just what process it goes through. So I don't want to linger too long. But when we're tanning the hides, it's important to make sure that it's tanned all the way through. We check the concentration of the solution to make sure that it's dense enough. We also take cross cuts of the hide to see, if the brown color goes all the way through, that means it's fully penetrated. So here's a cross section of a sheepskin. This is just an example of a very different looking hide. This has been put in a lime solution to cause it to swell, but sheep tends to be very fatty. It has an awful lot of connective tissue. So it's a very different looking hide structure. So, but this is a cross section of a cowhide. So the top is where the grain layer is, and the bottom sort of hairy portion is the closer to the flesh side of the animal. That light portion in the center there means that it isn't quite tanned all the way through. So that's not ideal. So, this is the fat liquor. It looks pretty gross, and but it's basically different oils and greases that you add to the skin to make it soft. So vegetable tan skins. This is what we do with them when we're drying them. I put this picture in here on the left just to show that you can find some very interesting character on these skins. This one had some surgery done to it, so it has the stitch marks on there, which it recovered from. So this is the skins once they're dried and taken down. This is referred to as the crust stage. So they're dry. They're still haven't been finished in any way. So there's no dyeing, no splitting, no embossing. And here's some of the issues that you can have with defects. One thing that's important to note with leather and parchment both is that the end product is only going to be as good as the raw material. If you've got crappy hides, if they're rotten or they weren't stored well and they have bacterial damage, the tanning process and the parchment process aren't really going to be able to get rid of that. So you can end up with some very interesting character and appearances, but it's certainly not going to be consistent. So these are just examples of some of the things that you can see. This is bacterial damage. So, and also bacteria will attack the roots of the hair. That's the easiest point of entry for bacteria, is to go into the roots of the hair, and it will cause hair slip, where the hair will come out by the roots and it will take some of the pigment with it. You will end up with very blotchy patterns, which is also that's a bad sign. That means you've got degraded hides. Here is an example of other things that we find on hides. This one, that's basically an awful lot of pimples. Goats tend to be very greasy, and that will sometimes present itself as a lot of zits, which is kind of gross, but we've all been there. Here again is another example of a scar on a goat hide. So these are iron stains when somebody threw this onto a pallet with nails on it, and the iron reacted with the hide, and throughout the process and the changes of pH, it turns like a dark blue color. So this is a goat skin that somebody shot with a BB gun, or buckshot, I should say. And those were embedded in the hides when we received it. So somebody must have not liked that goat. And also here on the right is some blood stains. A animal that wasn't slaughtered properly. You will see those stains show up in the skins. You can sometimes get rid of them, but oftentimes those stains are there for good. And here's what happens when the buckshot makes it through to the end. It will be embedded in the hide, and you have to try to pry it out, or not use those hides in the first place. So other examples of issues are, cuts and holes, bad butchering jobs. That will certainly limit the amount of usable area that you can get from a hide. So here's an example, as I mentioned before, of a hide that's been tanned through properly, the one on the left, and then that big white streak in the center of the hide on the right shows that the tannins haven't fully penetrated. That takes a lot more time and a lot more chemical finessing in order to get that to work properly. One of the drawbacks of veg tan leather, for instance, is that it will fade in sunlight, not necessarily a problem that other types of leather will have, but it will change color, I should say. Sometimes it will darken, sometimes it will fade, but that's something to be mindful of. Iron stains also, very reactive to iron. So especially on the leather, once it's been veg tanned, you'll see those stains show up if you're not careful. Brands, you'll see brands on a lot of the hides. Those don't go away. They definitely leave a mark. These are examples of hides. Those are cow sides that we've dyed. We call that color sunflower. Nice warm color. And then here are some others. Some of our leather. These are large calf hides. Very interesting, very prominent grain pattern on the hides. And then this one I think is kind of funny. Somebody thought of this. And, but if we melt a horse, we could use it to stick stuff to other stuff. Dude, is everything okay at home? So people have told me that sometimes. Why do you work in a business like this? Are you glutton for punishment? No, I'm not, but it's a family business and I do find it fascinating and I enjoy making stuff with my hands, which I'm sure a lot of you guys can appreciate. So, and I've definitely made an awful lot of different stuff and it certainly keeps work interesting is to try new stuff. So thank you very much. There's some of our contact info if you guys want. So I think that's the end of my lecture. So I'm going to get out of the.
Great, Jesse. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Try to escape, exit full screen. There we go. Okay. Move that. There we go. Okay. Now, trying to go back to the Zoom meet where you guys all are. How do I do that?
It's stop sharing.
Stop sharing. Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go.
There it is. Yeah, good.
So that's a brief overview, as brief as I could manage, but I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have. Linda had also suggested to have some samples of material to show. So I can just grab a bundle from behind me and hold on, I can pull some of those out. So.
There are a couple of questions, Jesse. I don't know if you want to answer them now or show.
I'd be happy to answer them now.
So I'll read them, but if somebody's got something they want to jump in on, I think that's okay too. So one question was, how many hides do you process each week?
It depends as we've got the bottlenecks tend to be the amount of hides that we can fit in one drum. So, and we have basically 2 tanning drums that we are using at any one time. So 40 to 50 cow hides, which is 3,000 pounds worth of hides, but that would be probably more like 300 to 400 goat skins. So, but once that part of the process is completed, then those skins have to be stretched and dried, and that can take another week. So, I mean, if we were continually running material through, I would say probably on average 150 to 200 hides a week of various sizes.
Who's your biggest customer?
Right now, it would be for interior design and for furniture. The parchment was something that I just kind of stumbled across when I was in college, and the first group of customers that I found were were folks like you guys for bookbinding, conservation, and calligraphy and manuscripts and so on. But honestly, now at this point, our largest customer for the parchment would be interior design and for furniture. And so they use that as basically a veneer material for applying to hard surfaces like plywood and so on. And they use that for cabinet doors, desktops, tables, headboards, things like that, and for wall surfaces. So a lot of interior designers and furniture makers for the parchment, and the same for the leather. One of our biggest customers right now is like a high-end boutique furniture showroom down in New York City. And we sell them an awful lot of cowhide at the moment.
Jesse,
Super
I'm going to
interest-
jump. Sorry, I was going to just jump in because of along similar topics, and that was you had mentioned parts of leather for pianos and Steinways.
Right.
So, but I wasn't sure the way you were talking. Is like, are you still supplying them, or have they found another material? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, the type of leather that we have been producing has changed over my lifetime. But when I first got into the business working with my father, it was a lot of leather for the bottoms of bowling shoes and for the insides of pianos. We still do a fair amount of the leather for bowling shoes, but the leather for the insides of pianos, I mean, pianos, as you know, used to be like TVs. Everyone would have one in their parlor. That's almost non-existent now. So that, shrank and shrank and shrank to the point where, basically Steinway was our only customer. Steinway was actually our first customer. They're the reason that we were located in North Bergen, New Jersey in the first place, because we originally set up shop when we moved over from Europe in Philadelphia. And we were there for a few years, and then we were coaxed by Steinway to move our facility to North Bergen because it was right across the river, the Hudson River, from Upper Manhattan, which is where they had a manufacturing plant, a piano factory at the time. So that was about 1860, 1865 or so that we started working with them, and they kind of perfected the modern piano as we know it. And they were our longest customer. We worked with them for 150 years, and then, they basically came to us and told us that they'd found a synthetic replacement material called ultra suede, which did the same job, and they could, produce that artificially. So they still do occasionally buy a small amount of leather for padding for other parts of the piano, but I think that's probably more so that they can say that they are still working with U.S. manufacturers. So, but a little bit here and there. So technically, they are still a customer of ours, but they have been for over 150 years.
wow.
Has the recipe for alum tanning changed much?
No. Well, at least not the way that we do it. If you're, for applications of alum tawed leather, one that most people would recognize would be something like baseballs or softballs. That was technically alum tawed leather. So when that type of leather that they're making now, I'm not sure it's really considered alum tawing. It's more like a white tan or a mineral tan. So in that sense, the recipe may have changed, but pure alum tawing is just potassium, alum sulfate, eggs, flour, and olive oil, and then a lot of handwork to soften the hide and and then make it stretchy again. So, and that recipe has pretty much remained unchanged for a very long time.
The next question is also about alum tawing, which is why alum as opposed to not alum? Alum tawing. Am I saying that right, Linda?
It's a autocorrect that went crazy.
Okay.
Why alumni as opposed to alum?
That's it.
Yeah. I love autocorrect. Yeah, why alum? Because I think it was just the material that people had I mean, a lot of these things are just products of necessity. And I think, from what research I've done, one of the first references to towing with alum was there was some particular type of soil in somewhere around the Middle East that was high in alum content. So my guess is that somebody dropped a hide on this particular dirt and picked it up and softened it, and lo and behold, it made for much softer leather. So I'm guessing a lot of trial and error over the course of thousands of years made it so that that was the material that they decided worked for their purposes, and that has been sort of refined to the point where they realize that it's this aluminum compound that does what they need it to do. So, but that's why they chose that. I mean, it's a very simple but also a very weak chemical process that requires a lot of hand labor, and it's probably more hand labor than actual chemical process that makes it alum towing. As a matter of fact, if you get alum towing leather wet, you can technically wash the tannage back out, and it will revert back to a raw, stiff hide.
So that goes right into our next question, which is someone has a goat skin which is rolled and has been told that she needs to moisten it and stretch it to flatten it. Will water do that?
Well, is this leather or is this parchment?
Go ahead and unmute, Rosemary. Is it leather or parchment?
Hi, Jesse. It came from, I understand, it's goat. It was made in Colombia, and
Okay.
I think it's parchment. And
Yes.
I got it. I was told, I think in Lethbridge here, I think they were using them in the First Nations to make drums.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I don't. I want to use it for books.
Okay. Yeah, parchment doesn't like to stay flat. So a lot of times the best way to store it is to sort of roll it up. Although if it's rolled too tightly for too long, it's really difficult to sort of unroll it and get it to flatten out. But if you're rolling it up, you're sort of limiting whatever warpage there might be in the skin to at least just one direction. So that makes it a bit more predictable. When people have a skin like that they're looking to flatten out, what we usually suggest is put it somewhere, try to maybe roll it in the opposite direction, and maybe put it somewhere where it's a little damp, like leave it in the bathroom when you're showering, or put it in a basement that has a higher humidity. And I mean, those are some, sort of at-home solutions for that. And then take it out into a drier area, and then maybe clamp it down to a flat surface. And that may help to rehydrate and then flatten it again.
Okay. So if that doesn't work, do I just take it back to the store and say?
I'm not sure that the store would be able to do a whole lot. I mean, right, your original question was, can you add water to it? As soon as you get parchment wet, that basically sort of undoes. As I mentioned in my presentation there, parchment is an animal skin that's been, or maybe I didn't say this exactly, but parchment is an animal skin that's been stretched and dried under tension.
Yes.
So, which means that you have all of those skin fibers that are sort of glued to each other at a very low angle of weave, which is what makes it flat and dense. But as soon as you add water to it, it basically unglues those fibers from each other, and then it will no longer be flat when you're done. So it's important. There's a fine line between adding water to it and then rehumidifying something by misting or just higher humidity. So
Okay.
I don't think you want to add water to it directly, because it will, it'll warp, it'll leave spots. It will probably not likely be flat when you're done. You could get the whole thing wet and stretch it and dry it, but most people don't have the sort of setup that we have in order to flatten out a skin.
Yeah. So how what do you use to stretch it? Are you using, like, how many pounds are you pulling on it?
Well, we can punch those things pretty hard. And we also have clamps that we use to be able to stretch them in these frames. And that we can pull on those things so hard, and there's so much tension locked up in that skin that it will cause the frames to torque as the skin's dry, or sometimes it'll pull those clips inside and out,
Yeah.
and destroy them. So
Well, I just was thinking that maybe something like a double bed frame or a single bed frame might work if it was tight, that I could maybe use something like that.
that might work. That might work. I mean, yeah, people have been doing that for ages now, for thousands of years, where they will just take some poles or pieces of wood and lash them together and make a frame, and then they can sort of weave a hide into it. So you can stretch it and dry it out. It's just it's a
Okay.
lot of hand labor to do it.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to take up so much time. Thank you very
No
much.
problem. You're welcome.
Couple more questions. One
Sure.
is whether people can visit your facility.
Absolutely. Just be aware, it's smelly, it's small, it can be cold, noisy, but people are absolutely welcome to visit. We teach workshops. We have been teaching parchment making workshops for several years. It's usually a 2-day affair where people will come, Friday and a Saturday. We'll, I'll show them the beaming process. They'll get to flesh and scrape a hide themselves, and then we will dye, usually a goat hide, and then stretch that and a piece of calf parchment, so that then the next day it gives them the chance to finish it for whatever product they're looking for, if it's for bookbinding or for calligraphy. So they are welcome to do that. So yeah, we facilitate visits. We allow people to come for tours. And certainly it's always easiest to buy material when you're there and can see it with your own 2 eyes. So we are happy to have people come visit.
Great. And probably the website has all the different colors that you have leather available in.
That's correct.
And if a
We also
bookbinder
have-
needed a specific color, could you help them out?
Yes, we can do custom colors. If it's we often will have to charge a fee depending on how large a batch of material they're doing, but we also work with leather finishers. We don't do when I say finishing, I mean like a fine tuning and adjusting, say if it needs an embossed pattern or polyurethane or wax or a very specific color. That's something that's usually done in the finishing process, and that can be applied with a spray dye once the skin has been dyed and dried. And that they're usually pretty exact. I mean, you can show them a Pantone chip and they can usually get it pretty close to that. So,
Okay, I think we're almost at the end of our questions. 2 more real quick ones, and then you
sure.
wanted to show some samples. One was whether you ever sell your leathers at Codex International Book Fair and Symposium in Berkeley, Richmond, California.
I have been to Codex 3 or 4 times actually, and the first time I went, I mean, it's a great excuse to go to Berkeley and the Bay Area. I was lucky; I had a sister-in-law who lived in Berkeley, so it made staying there a very nice visit. She's moved, but additionally, when I first went, it was because people said, "Oh, well, you should go." I mean, David Lanning from Hewitt's, Mark Lamb from Harmonton, they were there. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go. Why not? But I realized only after I got there that I wasn't necessarily selling our material to the general public. I was more aiming to sell to the other vendors there, who were the people making books, who in turn were selling it to the public. So after I figured that out, made a bit more sense. But yeah, I have gone, but honestly, it wasn't really a big money maker for us to go there. It's nice to do that, but also when I've got limited time and just to pack up and go all the way across the country over to the Bay Area to do the show, it was, if I had to cut somewhere, it was probably that had to go. So I do miss it, and maybe we'll go back someday. But I know that it's coming up, right? It's coming in February, like about a month.
Is there a coating on colored parchment?
There can be. Again, you can do a spray dye to apply that the same way you would with leather. But the parchment that we do a lot of that. We call it drum dyeing, dyed in the drum in a bath. Aniline dyes, which are water-based dyes. So that's what we use to dye our parchment. And I can show
It's a
you
good
just-
segue into showing us your
right,
products.
a quick example, but this is a goat skin, and the dye tends to take to the hides very differently depending on thickness and the type of hide. There's a lot of variables. There is the pH of the hide. There's how much dye you're adding, whether you're just doing a quick dip or whether it's much longer amount of time, whether it's done in warm water. Different dyes have different rates of penetration. So there's any number of things that you can do to change what how the dye will affect the skin. So, but it does yield some very bright and very deep, rich colors. So a nice.
Jesse, it was my question.
red.
This is Linda. This is Linda speaking. It was my question. And could it ever have been sprayed with a waxy coating? Some of this repels gouache and it sticks for a while and then it cracks off.
Excuse me. That's possible. Most of the parchment dyeing that we've done, we usually do that for interior design. So not quite the same application. Plus, almost always they're going to be, spraying a finish onto that and not necessarily applying something directly. But a wax certainly would inhibit, moisture penetration. We don't really use waxes on our parchment. It's possible that whatever medium they use to apply a dye to the parchment could cause it to resist moisture. It could also be some of the oil content within the skin. Some skins are greasier than others or haven't been degreased as well as they should have been. And some of that oil will leach out over time and, can resist dyes or inks. And that's why they always tell you to pounce a hide, is to help absorb whatever surface oils that might have come up. So there's, I don't know, but that might
I've been advised to sand it, but I find that changes the color. So
yes, it does. The dye penetrates, but considering parchment is very thin, but it's very dense, which means that the dye doesn't penetrate very far into the hide. So as a result, if you sand it a little bit, you will probably start to sand off that dye and reveal the hide underneath. And yes, it will change the color.
right. Okay, thanks.
Did you have some more samples that you wanted to show? There was a question about what experiments you've been doing as well.
We've, excuse me, let me have a sip of tea. Yes, we do a lot of experiments. I mean, as I said, it's a family business. I'm not doing this for the money. It's got to be something that I enjoy doing. So the experimentation is the part that I enjoy, is creating new and beautiful things and different materials using different processes. Trying to recreate stuff. Some of the projects I've been working on are flexible parchment, by impregnating it with glycerin, for instance, was one experiment that I did, which made for a very sort of almost like an oilcloth type of a parchment. Alum tawed parchment, which is one of the experiments I'm working on now, where instead of taking a raw hide, I'm taking a piece of something that was already parchment and then trying to sort of reprocess it and taw it, which will hopefully make something very thin and very flexible. Transparent parchment, that's something else that I've also worked on by sort of tinkering with the process. So those are just some of the parchment experiments that I've been doing. There's also, leather is a whole nother ball of wax. There's a lot of different ways to finish leather or to tan it so that it's maybe a more sustainable or more traditional and archival type of leather. Different grain patterns, maybe applying a wax to give it some amount of water resistance. So there's a lot of experiments that I'm constantly doing, as well as different applications, whether it's for printing on or for drum heads, you name it, all sorts of stuff.
Jesse, I had a quick question. You
Sure.
touched on this in your lecture when you talked about parchment, but maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. So I'm just sort of curious if you could review how parchment is processed differently. Is it thinner? Is it there's no color? How is it different?
Sure, right. And I don't think I actually expressly said what the differences are. So I'm sorry I glossed over that. But and that's a very important point, which is the difference between leather and parchment is leather. The definition of leather is a skin that has been chemically altered to make it imputrescible to rot. And whereas parchment is just a raw skin that's been stretched and dried under tension. So it's the same raw material. And as I showed some of the processing there, it goes through the same process up to a point, which is the hair is removed, the flesh is removed, and it is washed and cleaned and degreased and so on. But then at that point, you can either stop what you're doing and then stretch it and dry it. And then you've got parchment, and it's technically still raw. It will cook if it gets too hot. It will get moldy and rot if it gets too wet. But it can stay in that state, that dried state, almost indefinitely. I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Magna Carta, there are lots of examples of manuscripts and artifacts that are made of raw animal skin that have been around for, in some cases, thousands of years. So it can stay in that stage. But if you were to continue on, then you would be producing leather. And that's where you're adding tannins and greases and oils and lots of other chemicals, resins and so on, in order to chemically alter the collagen fibers and turn it into something that's soft and stretchy and that can withstand higher temperatures and getting wet. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, but is not parchments would be typically thinner, or is that just it becomes thicker in a later process?
The reason parchment is so thin is because, as I said, stretched and dried under tension. And
Okay.
the reason being is that if it's not dried under tension, it will want to just basically sort of shrink, become a big, huge potato chip. It's important that it's dried under tension in order to keep its area and to keep it flat. And since it can't shrink this way, it will tend to shrink this way. So
I see.
what starts out as something that is a full thickness hide will, as a result of that drying and shrinking, will basically be compressed into something that is, 0.3 millimeters thick. So it's very thin, but only because it shrinks as it dries and creates a very, very dense substrate. That same amount of substance is what's in a piece of leather. It's just much thicker and much spongier and much
Oh, really?
softer. So
Okay.
it's the same hide material, and
Ah.
it's just in parchment, it's very compressed, whereas with leather, it's much spongier and softer.
Okay.
Jesse, I have a question, and you just mentioned you're experimenting with glycerin, and Rosemary's problem is her skin is dried, and permanently rolled.
Mhm.
Is there any sense here? Coat a dried piece with glycerin because it's so hydrophilic. Would
Mhm.
that moisten her skin enough to unroll it?
I honestly don't know. It would be interesting to try it. I mean, it depends. There's the differences in application, or what I should say is that how it is applied, how a lot of these chemicals or processes are done, the method that it's done in, will have a huge effect on the end product. So, I mean, you could try and brush something on or apply it while it's flat or dry, and it may not have any effect at all. Whereas if it's done while the skin is wet or in a much more moist atmosphere,
Yep.
you'll get a completely different end product. So
Yep.
it's a little difficult to say, not to
Thanks.
evade the
I'm going
question.
to try it. I'm going to try it.
Go ahead. Let me know how it turns out.
Jesse, I have a question as a small businessman, because when I see some of the images there, like you were showing machine, what would you call it? Staking machine. And it looked incredible dangerous. It looked, I'm wondering whether, is there such thing as occupational health people that come through and say, you got to protect yourself from this machine or put this guard on, or?
Well, knock on wood, we've never really had issues with that. I mean, there's a fair amount of common sense that we have to employ doing what we're doing, because as you can see, a lot of machines are dangerous. Some of them have safety measures. Some of them, like that, the setting or the staking machine that you mentioned, that machine is about 120 years old. It is perfectly engineered to do exactly what it needs to do, and nothing else. But back then they didn't really have, there wasn't an OSHA organization that sort of set that up. There are other ways to stake leather. I mean, there are automatic stakers, which are massive machines where you run a skin between canvas belts, and they've got pegs that will basically punch at the skin between belts, and it's enough to shake the building apart, and they weigh several tons. Those come with their own set of problems. So to answer your question, we've never had a visit from OSHA. I think maybe there is also the issue of us being so small that we're not really regulated in that way. So that's not to say that we don't try to be safe in what we're doing. But yeah, we've just been doing it for so long that you just know where to put your hands and where not to. And it's all about, it's all about the
Timing.
rhythm of the machine.
Right.
You can do this and this, but don't do it now because it'll grab you.
So along similar lines, you read in, or I've read in, medieval cities how tanneries, which, being in the city at one point, get pushed out because people are complaining about the smell and what gets put in the water. You mentioned that you don't use any of these heavy metals, which I can see, a lot of industries, well, like in our case, people who do chrome plating and everything, there's always the issue with these heavy metals and what's going down the drain, and that they measure that and everything. So in your case, you don't really have to worry about that because you're doing the vegetable tanning method, or?
Well, yes, doing the vegetable tanning method, we don't have to worry about the heavy metals, thankfully, because that is an issue that has caused tanneries everywhere huge problems. I mean, tanning used to be, it's not necessarily solely because of the heavy metals that they were working with, but tanneries used to be a huge industry in the United States. And one of the reasons that they ran into trouble was because they used a lot of these chrome chemicals and other chemicals, and didn't really know, or kind of conveniently skipped over the part where these chemicals can be cancer-causing agents. And as a result, they started to come under serious regulation, and to the point where there were regulations that they either couldn't or just didn't want to meet, and they said, forget it, we're closing up shop, moving overseas, or we're going bankrupt or going out of business. I mean, that, along with the labor costs, were the main reasons for that tannery or that industry sort of leaving these shores. But for us personally, right, we've never dealt with chrome. We don't want to have to deal with that, sort of burdensome regulation. And we're doing our best to try to produce beautiful materials without it. That being said, there are other things that we have to account for, like biological oxygen demand, or the pH of the water that we're releasing, or solid wastes, all of the sludge that gets generated when you're fleshing a whole lot of hides and dissolving a lot of hair. All of that needs to be accounted for too. And so we have to be very careful of how we process and treat our wastewater before we release it. And yeah, we also don't want to be a problem for our neighbors. When we set up shop where we are now, originally in 1981, we didn't have neighbors. We set up shop there because it was zoned as a light industrial building area. They changed the zoning, and now we're surrounded by apartment complexes and condominiums. So not really of our choosing. And as a result, we are very careful about what we do, and we try to keep our head down. We don't even like to put our name on the mailbox because we don't want people to know we're there and have something to complain about.
I see. Okay.
I think there's just a comment that Codex is in April this year. for anyone who wants
Oh.
to know that and is watching the recording. And then whether your company produced the parchment for the St. John's Bible, which was started in Minnesota.
Yeah, I have gotten to see the St. John's Bible. I've met with Donald Jackson. I've been to the St. John's in Collegeville. So it's quite the awesome project. But I think it's been going on so long that when they first started, I don't think I was really making what I would have considered good enough quality parchment in order to be able to supply them. So, I mean, there's, as you guys know, there's very few parchment producers around the world. I'm probably one of the newer ones, you know, compared to, say, Cowley's that has the institutional knowledge going back 150 years. So they could help produce, you know, very consistent material specifically for that, you know, for that project. So, ooh, that's cool, Linda.
I'm holding up a piece of your parchment that is absolutely wonderful. It's really nice to letter on, and it takes gold leaf really well.
That's
So
great.
this little horse is going to stand behind. So the little horse will stand behind on its own, and in those holes will be hoofs. And the poem is about the beauty of horses, about how fleeting and all that sort of thing. But that is wonderful to letter on. I can't say enough good things about it.
That is great to hear. I mean, I didn't go to school for making parchment. It's, you know, even if I wanted to, there's really no school that you can go to learn this. So it was a lot of trial and error. Nobody really wanted to tell me, that anyone who even knew how to produce parchment, they didn't necessarily want to tell me how to do it. I mean, for obvious reasons. So I had to learn a lot on my own. I'm still learning. There's still plenty of things that I don't know, but one of the ways that I do learn is from customers and clients and folks like you guys who will give me critical feedback. And that's super important. And it's very, very helpful.
Yeah. Good.
So are there any other questions for Jesse? I do sort of have one last one. I know, sorry, we're slowing down here, but the hides when they come from the slaughterhouse, is that like, are all the hides from a slaughterhouse used and made into leather? Is that, or?
No, they're not. I mean, this is, you're hitting upon a whole nother can of worms here with hide supply, which is pretty fascinating in its own right, and something that is of a lot of concern to a lot of people lately, which is like the sustainability of leather production, and you know, which goes hand in hand with people eating meat. So it's a much larger topic, but one of the problems is the waste that's associated with eating meat. And so one thing that people in the leather industry always like to point out, myself included, is that, you know, no animal, certainly not at the moment, you know, maybe it used to be the case, but no animal that we've ever worked with was killed for its hide. It's a byproduct of the meat industry. So everything that we're getting here either comes from farms, and these are animals that those farmers will have processed, and then they'll bring us the hides themselves, and we refer to that as tan and return or traceable leather. That's another option that we offer, is to be able to do that. Or it's coming from slaughterhouses, and again, those hides are all harvested off of meat, you know, from meat production. So otherwise, a lot of those hides will end up in landfills, and you're getting into issues of the global supply of hides and whether there's a big demand for leather or whether there's not. And the prices can go up and down. They can fluctuate like any other commodity. And that is, you know, if you're a farmer, for instance, and you used to sell your hide to recoup a little bit of the cost of your, you know, of your processing, at the moment, hides aren't really worth anything, and they're not being picked up by a lot of the hide producers the way they, or the hide buyers that they used to be, which means that now a farmer has to pay to throw that hide out. It's no longer a, you know, a commodity, a profitable commodity. It's now It's now cost. So anything that they can do in order to be able to recoup some of the cost of that, they will certainly do. And because otherwise it's just going to be wasted, it's going to be thrown out, landfilled, what have you, and somebody has to pay for that. And it's usually the farmer. That cost gets passed along to the farmer.
Mm.
So us doing what we're doing is we are trying to give people an alternative to having to waste their hide, is to be able to process it and turn it into a piece of leather or parchment. And I mean, obviously we charge for the service, but we think that, you know, it's a value added product when you're done, because you can point to an item, a leather goods item, for instance, that was produced using hides from your farm. And, you know, to be able to know exactly where that material came from is of huge importance too, whether it's like food or
Right.
textiles or leather. To be able to say
And-
that you know exactly where that material came from is important.
Probably more so as we go on in time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, I can, well, in case there are other questions and you guys are still thinking, I'll at least just show you a few of the examples of material that I brought. This is a goat hide. It's pretty small. This one's only about 2 square feet, but it almost fits on the entire computer screen. But this is our goat leather. We call this our high view finish, which is basically a milled. It's been dyed, it's been milled, which will make it very crinkly and grainy and pebbly. And then we will sort of tip the surface with another color, so it gives it sort of a two-tone effect. So that's one of the products that we produce. Here's another example. This is our coral. The first one was a turquoise, but this here, you know, also goat skin. And then we've got some of our other standard leathers. We have one that we call Palisades, and this is a embossed leather, fairly economical compared to some of the other leathers that we offer. And this one we tried to develop specifically for the binding, for people in the bookbinding trade. Because of the embossed finish, that means that you've got a nice uniform finish, pigmented, and as a result, you know, nice uniform color and nice uniform grain, which will give you a much better yield across the whole skin. So, and we offer the Palisades finish in, I think, a white, a gray, a mahogany color, and then a brown and a black. So that's one of the standard offerings that we have. And then we've got some of our regular leathers, you know, with the natural grain. So I'm sorry, the camera on the computer here can't really do them justice, but I personally prefer the natural grain and the character, but then again, I'm the producer, I'm not the customer, so customer's always right. But yeah, so we have a few variations. One other thing I want to mention before I forget is that I saw somebody ask about contact information, and I can certainly.
And purchasing, I think we should hear about how we can purchase your product.
So we have a website, and I think we have our updated pricing information on the website. I want to see, I also asked one of our staff to send over a link to the nice slick retail price list, although I don't really see it here, but I do have, hold on one second, I can see if I can pull it up.
I'll tell you one thing for sure, Jesse, after seeing the process, no longer am I going to crab about the price.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, and that is one of the things that people will say when they come and do our workshops is, you know, they'll leave and they'll say on their way out, now I understand why parchment's so expensive. You know, I mean, you should probably charge more given the
Yeah.
amount of work that you're putting into it. So yes, it is. I mean, parchment especially, partly because it's such a small sliver of the hide industry, they maybe haven't figured out how to automate that process as much as they have the leather industry. So, but parchment is very labor intensive, requires a lot of hand labor. The leather a little less so, but right, there's no way around it. It just requires a lot of work, and also partly due to our size. I mean, we're teeny compared to a lot of tanneries, and as a result, you know, we don't have those economies of scale that much larger tanneries can take advantage of. So, you know, we're hoping to change that, but you know, at the moment, that's the way things are. So our products are expensive, but we'd also like to point out that they're made here in North America. They're made with North American raw materials. It's a family business that you're supporting. You know, it's you know, if I was pitching to people in the United States, I would say it's domestically made. It's you know, U.S. manufacturing. So probably not as important to you guys up north, but you know, we are trying to do it here. We're trying to do it responsibly, and we're trying to make quality materials. So, and we think
Were
the
you
price
about
is-
to share a screen? Was that?
I
or-
was trying to see if I could pull up. Yeah, if you give me 1 second. Okay, I have a price list here. It's a sort of a spreadsheet pricing, but I'm if you want, I can put this up on the screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so share the screen.
You could also send a hard copy or a
An email.
email. We'll disseminate it.
I'm happy to do that as well. Yeah, I'll send that, and then you guys can distribute. But
Oh yeah, there it is.
so here you go. This is our current retail pricing. I mean, you know, I mean, and we're a bit of a hybrid in that we are doing retail, but we are also the actual makers. So we do retail, and then we can also do, you know, I know I'd spoken to some of you yesterday about doing, you know, wholesale, you know, and discounted products for resale, and we're certainly happy to talk about that with you guys. You know, we can discuss that afterwards, or I can put you in touch with our folks in the office to see if we can come up with some workable arrangement. We're happy to try that.
What's
but
the
these are our
difference
retail
between
prices.
calligraphy and manuscript?
So calligraphy has just been prepared on one side, say it's going to be for like a broadside or something, whereas manuscript would be something for a book page that's meant to be written on and used on both sides.
Thank you.
Sure. And as far as the leather goes, the Palisades I explained to you, as far as the goat, Hudson is basically dyed and unfinished. High View is the one with the two-tone finish, and Empire is basically like a waxed leather, which I don't know if I have an example here of, but it's nice. It's got some shine to it. It's got like a little bit of a waxy finish. It you know, gives it a bit more. It can withstand a bit more scuffing and a bit more use. You know, it's pretty sexy looking stuff. And then the cow traceable is, as I mentioned, from hides where we can actually, you know, we actually know the source of the material. Hudson is dyed and unfinished. Empire is dyed and waxed finish, and the Bergen is basically dyed and then smooth rolled to give it a nice shiny finish. So I think hopefully the rest of those are self-explanatory. But I'm happy
Great.
to share all that with you guys. And last thing I wanted to mention is we have a newsletter, which if people are interested in, they're welcome to sign up for. I think you can do that through our website. And then we have one of the things that we've been doing recently is we call it Wild Hide Wednesday. So we have an awful lot of different experiments, or you know, we did a sample trial color, or you know, a color that we didn't quite turn out right, or any number of defects, or just something that might make any of these hides unique in any way. We will try and offer those like once a month on a Wednesday. we'll do Wild Hide Wednesday, where we'll put that up on our Instagram page for sale, and we'll have individual hides, usually all fairly different from each other. But as an example, this particular coral goat is going to be up, available on sale as of next Wednesday. So, but we usually put up about 10 items, and all of those you can see on our Instagram feed. So,
All right, thank you, Jesse. I think that about ties it up. That was a lot of information to take in. I really appreciate you taking the time.
and I'm happy to reshare this. I'll send this all to you, and you guys can distribute this to your members as you see fit.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, no, we can do that. Just a bit of housekeeping. I'll just mention that our next meeting will be February 17th. More on the subject here, we're still pinning that down, but we know that we'll have a shorter presentation, maybe under a half hour or something like that, so that we can leave time for show and tell and talk about sort of our kind of local projects we want to do. The following month, March 17th, we have a papermaker, author, podcaster, Helen Hebert will be joining us. And the following months are still open yet. So thanks again to Jesse Meyer. And also I'd like to thank our local team, Thea and Annette and Linda and Carolyn. And so we hope to see you again next month.
I just shared a little bit of contact info there in the chat.
I see that, yeah.
So our web address, phone number, and our Instagram handle. So if you guys want to grab that if you want, that's how to get in touch with us.
Jesse,
Yeah,
do you remember I asked you for 15 minutes? If you could manage to spare 15 minutes, you Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me to join you guys. So it's been nice to talk with you all. And right, anything that we can help you with, and happy to continue the conversation individually at your leisure.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
All right.
Oh, with that,
Thanks
I'll
to you
say, yeah, thanks. And I'll say good night. Thanks for coming out.
Take care all. Bye.
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 Gotta stop recording here.